Hi everyone.
Hello everybody.
Hello, welcome. Just so you know, it is 8 p.m. here, and we are not drinking in the morning.
But if we were, no judgments.
No judgments.
And if you are, no judgments. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone. Welcome. As Sarah Sams says so beautifully in her poem Appraisal Report, Atom City.
Sooner or later, someone's going to have to take a shit.
So we are Shit Theatre. I'm Becca.
And I'm Louise.
Thank you.
And you're welcome.
We are huge Sarah Sams fans, and we are also, we were also Europe's leading experts in Sarah Sams.
Until the British people voted to leave the European Union and we were demoted to just the UK's leading experts in Sarah Sams.
Yeah. We're academics from the Myland College of Performing Tricks in London's East End, though we are speaking to you today from Yorkshire.
Thank you.
We've
been studying Sarah Sams for many years now, forming the collective academic group, the SS, which keeps being shut down on Facebook.
Presumably because Sarah's poetry is too real, or maybe our opinions are too radical.
We trust tonight,
or as you would call it,
today, the radical analysis of art is not too much for this book launch.
Hopefully. Thank you. So as leading experts of or in Sarah Sams, we should start with some background.
Yes, so there are contradictory arguments about when exactly Sarah Sams was born, but we do know exactly why she was born.
And we can also provide a detailed analysis of how. Now, we forgot to check with you, Sarah, if you were born by C-section, so that's just it's a guestimation.
Apologies. That was a good guess. Mom, you there?
Apologies to your mother, Kathleen, if that's an accurate
description.
Diorama of your birth.
But for the sake of this book launch, we're not focusing on that. We're going to talk today on where Sarah Sams was born.
In Nazi Germany in 1939, the National Socialists declared war on Poland or France or something like that. But most importantly, in the end, on us and also you.
The war was ended with a world-changing catastrophic event, the literal catalyst of which originated from Sams's hometown of Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where the atom bomb was developed.
We Shit Theatre visited Oak Ridge together in 2017 as part of our ongoing Sarah Sams research.
You did.
We did.
Yeah.
We gained entry into her mother's house on the maternal side.
Thank you, Kathleen.
We infiltrated friends and family and discovered the difference between your salad and our salad.
The difference is mayonnaise. Thank you.
Most importantly, though, we got to see the artist live, work, breathe,
and eat
shrimp
in her hometown.
And it revealed a lot about the genesis of her genius and some things about Mexican food in Tennessee, all of which can be found in our as yet unpublished and unauthorized Sarah Sams biography,
The SS Story, if anyone's looking to publish.
We discovered a lot about Sarah Sams and her context and history, beginning in Oak Ridge.
Now, I'm sure everyone here knows the famous side effects of close proximity to nuclear radiation.
Hair loss, fatigue, cancers, and poetic urges.
Sams has been suffering with the poetic urges for many years.
Again, nobody knows quite how many years, as there's still so much conjecture over when she was born.
Yeah. During the last Sarah Sams conference at the Strata Academy in Prague in 2011, there was famously a huge fallout.
Pun not intended.
Between warring academic factions over Sarah Sams's birth date.
Thank you. This book, Sarah Sams's book, Atom City, which is launching today like an A-bomb of literature, is in 3 parts.
Which we, as the leading experts in the field of Sarah Sams, can correlate directly with her 3 parts, which are head, thorax, and abdomen, same as any woman.
But as well as those 3 parts, we would like to ask Sarah, was the choice of 3 main sections related to Oppenheimer's name for the first test of the atomic bomb, aka the Trinity?
Is it related? Well, yeah, of course, absolutely. And the whole like parts of the atom. You got to pause.
No, please, could you go further into
we
that?
don't, Sarah. We don't know any of the parts of the atom.
What? Oh my God, my dog. Oh, my dog just farted. So
Is this part of your answer, Sarah?
Okay. No,
he features in one of the poems, so maybe he's or she's.
I couldn't hide it on my face. I didn't want you to think that I was making this like stink face at you. No, the parts, it came in 3 parts kind of naturally after like a lot of hemming and hawing. But I think the first, it's like sort of like 3 stages of coming to terms with where I'm from. And like the first section is very like atoms of the body. It's very like the heavier guilt and trying to work through the different voices that I was thinking about. Then it's like, okay, well, I got to look at this head on, right? So then it's atoms from your hometown. Mm-hmm. And then last it's like trying to figure out how to have how to live with the grief and the knowledge of like being, from a town that from a science town that was developed in large part for violence, right? So like how do you sit with grief and joy at the same time? And so I think it's more like the narrative arc, like the sort of the beginning and the middle of the end of my process of figuring this out. But there's a lot of fun science metaphors in there that we could spend time teasing out if we wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's.
You don't have to go into that now because we are going to dig through the 3
okay.
sections.
All right, I'll leave it. The whole electron, neutron, proton, we'll leave that.
I've literally never heard of those words, but that is the UK education system for you then.
Yes. I blame Thatcher.
We all blame Thatcher, Louise.
Okay. For the rest of you who may want to ask a question, there will be an opportunity for you to ask Sarah questions at the end, but we will probably have covered everything by then.
Yeah, because we are, as we mentioned, the the UK's leading Sarah Sams experts.
Okay, so we will delve into the first section of the book, Atoms of the Body.
And the book begins with a poem, But Think, Are You Authorized to Tell It? Which Sarah's going to read for us now.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. I have to try to put on the serious poet face and poet voice.
Great job.
Brilliant job.
But think, are you authorized to tell it? I didn't know the secret we kept when I lived in the town where quiet vines thread trees in winter. Now I visit every year to see the trumpet creeper gone brown and the kudzu like dead party streamers. And today there was a squirrel eyeing me from his side, the way a squirrel must. He clattered on the roof and called for me to speak more plainly, so I'll shoot her pared down. A small phrase to hold and turn over, a coin with 2 sides, cool and smooth and seductive, like security. You could bite the coin to test the secret, or lay it on an eye as you sleep, just for the quality of the image. Electrons dance inside metal like dreams. Walking deep through Greenway Trail, I listen to the story of Tsutomu, who made it home from Nagasaki to Hiroshima after one white flare in time to see the second. That I sit on a root shiny with sap from a higher wound, tooth down on what I meant to share with you. The hard coin whirs against my tongue. I don't believe I've ever been quiet just because I was told.
Beautiful.
I've heard you read that a number of times on interviews and stuff like that. It feels like a real intro to the book. Did you write that first, or have you been sat on that for years, or did it come naturally as an intro?
No, I think it was the very last poem that I wrote. And it was after, I'd given this to a lot of readers that I trust, after it just sort of wasn't coalescing, and multiple readers, including my friend Rachel said this, definitely Bojan said this, like there's a little bit of my voice missing, like just sort of speaking directly to the audience, like what brought me to this project personally. And it wasn't until a mentor from Davidson College read it and said it to me that I was like, oh yeah, Alan Michael Parker, you're right. I need to I need to really think about what, like, I don't know, sort of where my voice belongs in this chorus of voices, and also like admit sort of head on the like my role in being a citizen in this town, right?
Amazing. I suppose it makes sense it was written last then.
Yeah.
Because it sort of beautifully encapsulates the rest of what you're about to read in the book.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
you.
Thanks, Michael from Davidson. Also, I still have your Davidson hoodie. You left it in my hometown in Bury St Edmunds in like 2012. So I will post that back to you at some point.
Although it is in our box of Sarah Sands paraphernalia.
Yeah, I mean,
you keep it, and you enjoyed it. It's just funny because it's like I knew there were poems that I needed to write that were harder for me to write because it like had to deal with my own shit, right? Like I had to look a little bit deeper at myself. Yeah.
So the title of that poem was "But Think, Are You Authorized to Tell It?" And that was named after a World War II propaganda slogan. But think, are you authorized to tell it? Right?
Yeah, exactly. So I found it in the archives of DOE photos. So I can't remember if it was a pamphlet or a billboard, but it was something that was passed around, like, you know, just make sure you keep your mouth shut, don't share anything with anyone, and that's the you know, the ethos of the town as it in its inception, right? As any Manhattan Project town, it was like secrecy is first, right? So,
well, we were thinking about this because we were like, we thought it was probably lucky that you were born in the States because we looked into the archive of English propaganda slogans from the time, and they included
"Save kitchen scraps to feed the hens," and "Keep a pig or start a pig club."
And we were thinking about the drama of the English version of the poem that you would have written. Instead of "But think, are you authorized to tell it?" We've written one called "But think, are you authorized to keep a pig or start a pig club?" Which Louise is going to read for you now.
God.
I didn't know the secret we kept when we kept a pig. Today there was a squirrel eyeing me from his side the way a squirrel must, which is totally different to a pig, which is more cool and smooth and seductive like security. I don't believe I've ever run a pig club just because I was told.
Do you have any feedback on that, Sarah? We've never.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to run a pig club, it should be your own choice.
Well, what the stress was, we've never run a pig club just because we were told.
Yeah.
It was one of many reasons.
You want it to be for other reasons too, right? Yeah. Or you want to know what those reasons are. You want to do a little bit of self-investigation.
Come through.
You just don't want to go around starting or joining a pig club, do you? But back to
what is a pig club? Like you have a pig and someone else has a pig and then your pigs get together?
I think you have a pig and then someone comes around and has a go on your pig. Maybe.
Or as a club, do you just get together and talk about pigs, even though you have pigs?
It's not part of that part of history hasn't made it through.
It hasn't made it through to the GCSE history books.
Yeah, our GED.
Deep in the archive.
It's in the archive. We had to dig for that. Like, we had to dig for, but think, are you authorized to tell it? And speaking of that, we looked up the man that Sarah mentions in the poem, which is Tsutomu Yamaguchi. Is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah, I have pronounced it wrong every time because I have story right next to his name, like an
oh god, that's a hard one.
Decision in terms of lineation for me. But yeah, that's right.
Okay, so for people here who haven't heard his story yet, a resident of Nagasaki, Yamaguchi was in Hiroshima on business when that city was bombed on August 6th, 1945.
So he was in Hiroshima and then he returned to Nagasaki the following day. And despite his wounds, he returned to work in Nagasaki on August the 9th.
He is a man who loves his job.
Yeah. And that morning at work, he was being berated by his supervisor as crazy after describing how one bomb had destroyed the entire city of Hiroshima and then the Nagasaki bomb detonated.
And he died of stomach cancer in 2010 at the age of 93.
Yeah.
The world has no logic.
I know, it's an insane story.
How did you find that?
I read an article in Guernica about his life. I think maybe I heard about him first on a podcast or on NPR or something, you know. There was a story honoring his life, but I read a really beautiful article about which shared a lot of those details, including the wounds that he suffered and then healed from. And it was just, the investigative journalist did a really great job sort of looking into his life and the yeah, perhaps lucky is too casual, like
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I read more about him. And I just had to, yeah, go ahead.
His name is Tsutomu Yamaguchi, if anybody wants to
Yeah,
look
and
him up.
I can share a link at the end too to that article. It's a beautiful piece.
So in the first section of your book, Atom City, we also meet a man named John Hendricks a number of times.
And a bunch of poems including Prophecy After Heartbreak, Prophecy After the Death of a Daughter, and Think of Sleep, and all of those.
That's just in the first section. And Sarah has insisted that she will never read Prophecy After the Death of a Daughter since you've had Billy.
Mm-hmm.
But you're going to read now Prophecy After Heartbreak.
Yeah, will do. And this is in the voice of John Hendricks. So anyone from Oak Ridge is going to know this like sort of weird local figure looms large in Oak Ridge lore. So in John Hendricks's voice, Oak Ridge Valley, Tennessee, 1902. She left me and I missed being touched. That's the reason I went barefoot through the woods. Bare feet give one the sense of being intimate. The dirt tickled me. A speck of oak lodged between my toes. Then I saw two streams run out in opposite directions, though they laid beside one another. This struck me, called to me like my long gone wife. Listen here, the stream said. Listen better. If I said, God, how the earth of her would shake, you figure I'm prone to exaggerate. But you're imagining our love now, which is good. It's what people forget. You can call love God if you like. I lay down because I missed her and because desire is a kind of God. We all know that. When the ground kept whispering, I pressed an ear down. Of course I called it God. By now you know that men around these parts will do that. Hear a woman's breath from deep within, say it's God-like. Which is the point. Listen better. I listened so long I got hungry, like when we used to lie all day in bed. And in that state I dreamed, listening. I could hear what was brewing here, as if the seed of disease, the sound both strange and close to home, like how my belly rumbles in a fight. And in the rumbling I heard, yes, the pounding down of railroad ties, and yes, the rushed up factories for the bomb. I think I had the word for bomb. How they'd enlist all this I've said as platform for their story. All here John saw the atom split, and here John spoke God's plan. But I was trying to say, I hear you. I was trying to say, come back home now.
Oh God, poor John.
Poor John.
Oh God, poor John. So we'd never heard of John Hendricks. So we looked him up, and he's, as you said, he's like the sort of local legend of Oak Ridge. And the woman that you reference and his great love is his wife. And after their kid Ethel died, his wife moved to Arkansas, taking all of his remaining children with her, and left him in Oak Ridge alone.
And from what we can gather, coincidentally, it was at this time of great stress and upheaval that he started hearing voices.
Yes, exactly.
And can you tell us? So he is it that he went into the forest and he heard voices and predicted the atom? Can you tell us a bit more about what it was? What's his relationship to the Manhattan Project?
Yeah, so I mean, the story goes that he went out into the woods and laid there for 40 days and 40 nights, because why not? Like 40, right? 40 days and 40 nights. And the first thing that he did when he like came back across a neighbor or another local figure, I can't remember who, but there's the transcript of what he supposedly said. You can, in more archival research, you can find it. He was like, oh, this like this is going to be the place of a great unsettling. And he had some images about like a great factory was going to come and it was going to end the greatest war that ever. Like there's some language, there's some words that just like really resonate with the language that we used to talk about World War II and the Manhattan Project in general. And so basically this story, I mean, I think, I mean, his name was always in my, like on my mind when I thought about the story of Oak Ridge, but there was one exhibit in particular at the old American Museum of Science and Energy that had this like cutout version of him. And then like, and a spotlight would come on and you would hear the supposed, the language of his prophecy and so there was a whole exhibit about it. And as you can imagine, a lot of what it was used for is say like, well, like this was foreseen, right?
This was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
So do you believe it?
Do I believe that he actually prophesized?
Yes, you believe that he said this.
What you're asking Sarah here
in
is,
the 18th century.
you mean like, do you believe he said it, or do you mean it was a prophecy?
Well, if he said it when he was meant to have said it in what the 18th century, then there's no doubt it was a prophecy. Do you believe he genuinely said it?
I do. I think so. But I think like, you know, if you go and maybe I can post that too. I can make a little Google Doc for anyone who's interested in reading further. But if you Billy
read further.
It's like, you know, anyone who is sort of settling with or like sort of sitting with the darker side of humanity could say such things. But I don't know. Do I believe that like he knew time is weird and like everything's relative. So I don't not believe it. But I definitely believe that, you know, in a time of great grief and trauma, this man was like sitting with the darker belly of humanity's beast, right? And that's what drew me to him as a figure. Yeah.
And also what I love about him in your poems is, despite all this, the sort of quote unquote craziness and madness of prophecy, you have so much empathy for him on like a human level. Like you're counting down the days till he remarries, and it's like the empathy of how lonely he was is really present. Which I'm just like, poor John.
Yeah.
Oh God, poor John. You end up just like so humanly identifying with some mad guy on the floor, listening to the roots of the trees.
Yeah, which I think is another like beautiful thing your book achieves, is there's with every poem, with all these grand concepts, there's always a human journey in through it, which is brilliant.
That's such a big compliment. And I think that's, you know, why I wanted to write them and why I wanted to write the poems. Because it's like, on the one hand, I want to think about the human stories and also why those human stories matter to me. And it's just like, there's a lot of like larger, grander narratives or histories about the Manhattan Project, about Oak Ridge, but like listening to the human stories and figuring out what they mean, but also what they mean to me was the goal of the book. So thank you. It's a huge compliment.
I mean, I think that leads nicely into our next sort of question.
So we're in this first section of your book, we get introduced to loads of people who are also close to you, like there's your loved ones, like there's moments with Bo and your friends and your Aunt Margaret and your dad Billy, dedicated to, along with your daughter. Not us, that's fine.
Not us,
that's fine. We're not
fine.
There yet. But the next question we had was if you intended the book to feature your family so heavily,
or did they sort of creep in over the process, or did they in fact specifically request a message?
I don't think anyone is like, hey, write a poem about me. I feel like that's
exactly was like, if there's not at least one poem about me, your mother,
then I don't approve.
Then I don't approve this book.
You know, it's like, oh man, Sally Ball is a mentor of mine at ASU, and she wrote a really beautiful blurb for the book trailer. And I'm going to get it wrong right now, but she said something about how I was looking at family and its most relational elements. It was such a beautiful sentence. And I think it just was inevitable that they came in. If I was trying to figure out like who I am and what it means to be where I'm from, like there's like a whole web of people there, like both loving and supporting me, but helping me figure that out along my life. And so I have to look at all of that, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and love, like, it's like love and grief are big, like they're big elements in this book. And it was not purposeful. I started doing like like I said, research into the Manhattan Project, into the science, and but it was almost like, if I'm really honestly looking at this, then I have to figure out who I am as I'm looking, like who the observer is, and working through my relationship with the people I love in my life was a big part of that.
But just to check, if we were to specifically request, do you think we might feature in your next book?
I won't say no.
I will accept that.
Don't accept that right
The last poem in this section of the book is the next poem you're going to read for us, Scene with Granny and Lightning.
And you mentioned at the end of the book that your granny, which is what I call my granny as well, she grew up in rural Western Virginia, and we just wanted to know if you could tell us a bit more about her and your relationship to her.
Oh my gosh.
The poem, or is it too huge? Is Granny too huge?
Granny, it's huge, but she was a wonderful woman. She was very stern, very like grounded in her faith and her Christian faith. But her story is like, she didn't really talk about herself a lot, and like there were just a few stories that really stuck out to me, and I don't even know that I got them right, but the way that I remember them is the way that they affected me. So that's how I worked through. But like so she grew up, in the Great Depression and, before, but lived through the Great Depression, and she lost multiple siblings to whooping cough when she was younger. And I just she never talked about that with us. Like, it was always like, here's a biscuit and some homemade blueberry jam, and like, has anyone told you about the birds and the bees? I don't want to.
Yeah.
It's very like.
So the sister referenced in this poem, was it whooping cough that claimed her?
No. She died in 2013.
Okay, that is good that she did not die of whooping cough.
No.
That was worrying.
Cured that.
It was heart failure. Yeah. Huh?
I never had the whooping cough injection because of epilepsy in my family.
Oh, really? Oh, you don't get it?
I've not been injected for whooping cough, so I'm glad you didn't die of whooping cough in 2013.
Yeah, because you don't want that to be around anymore. Yeah, it's like, yeah. Anyway, this so theme of childhood illness, God help me, as a new parent, is like running through this book. I think I really it felt so foreign to me, and I wrote most of these poems before I had a kid, so it just like felt so foreign to me to either lose a sibling really young, or it felt like out of a sad movie. But it's like, no, this is real. Like, this is obviously, but apparently this poem is based on a true story. So I won't tell the story. I will just read it, and that way you'll hear the story through the poem. I mean, I think I got it right. Family, if you're there, feel free to let me know what I might have exaggerated.
But also, if you think Sarah's got the story wrong, it's poetry.
It's poetry. But you know what a poet loves is to be corrected while she's reading during a YouTube live comment section. So just feel free.
Go ahead.
All right. Anyways, thank you. You're experts, so I will defer to you there. It's called Scene with Granny and Lightning. 1930. There's a cold pail by my feet when lightning shucked from roof to cowl to thumb makes me buzz near how lickin' hail does. And now me, all quiet like, and the door stuck just as pitiful to the barn. Which course starts up shaking. What a rapturous priss of a storm we're in, her grand finale as frantic as a whooping cough, akin to engine failure. How when I dance my limbs will tremble as they loosen, then wilden, then let a small bundle of intimates out to who knows where. Cows don't like this. A cow likes routine. So I make biscuits, though what milk I have is scorched. And it's 3 months from here my sister goes, too young to know it. When they lower her, sound like a cast iron slung to the back of the rack, the self-same tremor finds me. My body hums out after her through the hinge.
That was from your granny.
Wow. We, as leading Sarah Sams experts, think this poem leads very nicely into the second section of the book. And we think, we've got good knowledge that we think that's probably why it was placed there.
Yeah, so part of it. Yeah.
So the second section is called Atoms from Your Hometown.
And this section had us asking, what happens within the empty space people leave behind?
What happens when atoms are obliterated?
And who is Leo Slizzard?
The internet claims that Leo Slizzard was an Hungarian-American physicist, but in fact, Leo Slizzard is an Hungarian-American physicist, and he is with us here today. Hello, Mr. Slizzard. Thank you for coming.
Mr. Slizzard features in Sarah's poem Stockpiling with Mr. Slizzard.
Mr. Leo Slizzard. We wanted to know, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Slizzard?
Sarah, would you be able to check, see if anyone's got any questions, or if you have any yourself?
And that's obviously bearing in mind
that his areas of expertise are thermal and statistical physics, nuclear bombs, and proto-radiotherapy.
Now, Mr. Slizzard's lawyer has advised him not to answer any questions on the Manhattan Project, on the splitting of the Arthur particles, or any of his dating history.
So please put those questions away, but feel free to ask him anything else relating to his area of expertise, but foregoing.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of delay between this and the chat, so I'll give it a minute to see if people, my life, my life is Sesame Street right now, right? Like, it's just too on the nose, guys. All right, anybody have any questions? You can text me. What's that? I'm just gonna sit on screen with Leo. No questions so far, but I'm sure one will come in. Okay, Courtney Fowler, what questions do you have? Courtney Fowler, Jesse Sensabar, Anchor Monsoon, Ander, Michelle, anyone got a question for me? I'm gonna go get some more water while people think about this one, okay? Okay, Ander Monson wants to know, can a person in a wheelchair shoot a crossbow?
I'm sorry, my lawyer says I'm not allowed to answer that question either.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Slizzard. Thank you. That was Leo Slizzard, and Hungarian physicist.
Thank you. Thank you, Leo.
Thank you, Leo Slizzard.
Oh man.
Apart from Slizzard, another theme in Atom City is the connection between the desert and Appalachia. Sarah lives in Arizona now, I'm sure everybody knows, close to where the bomb was tested, having been built in her hometown in Tennessee.
So you've clearly made it your life's work to follow this bomb around. It's amazing that you knew you were going to write this book on the day you were born, whenever that was.
Yeah, we don't need to get into that. We can't get into that. And again, the controversy in Prague of your birthday, we don't want to bring that up. One poem which connects the two locations of the desert and Appalachia is Targeting, which we've also requested Sarah read for us. With you.
Yeah, I'll move to it.
Slizzard also requested it.
Yeah.
His favourites.
One of his favourites.
I'm not sure how good his English is.
Yeah, I would love to read this poem for you without any further ado. I want some of that. I'll get some of that too. It's called Targeting. We have been assaulted by green, our eyes so washed through with green that any other shade, a mistake of brown, a leaf knocked down by sudden rain, makes in us a desire to clean. So saturated, on a porch hugged tight by humidity, magnolia, poplar, and bush, the static bumble of globed bees, I think of a word I've learned for the city we call home, Hosdo, the hot place. The word tugs us out of the Appalachians, the landscape of my childhood, and sends us back, which is to say, westward. But first, down into the valley where I was made, where our language was used to abstract all processes of production. Next, into the letters M, E, D. And quick, before we're lost in a maze of fog and factory, up and outward again, westward as promised. We're over the rolling hills and Tennessee swamplands, over the Mississippi, which had long been a border in the mind past which all was unknown, and therefore clear. Over the river and through the Midlands, where Laura Fermi once felt, though perhaps in Italian, the impact of emptiness. And before we feel it too keenly ourselves, I'm leaning toward the lavenders and scarlets of Ruth's southwestern skies. But not to be too long distracted, not to linger, not to be so moved by the New Mexico pinon, not to be entranced like the scientist's wife by the rocks that appeared as cathedrals of yore. To escape from Los Alamos, to have learned from the trap we've already set against ourselves, have fallen into before. Not to loiter again under that awning of history's wide-mouthed myths, not to be ensnared, not to awe, not to be too taken back by what must have been the beauty of the bomb. To pick at such light, like the skittish kitten who just now visited the steps of this very porch. This kitten now disappearing into green, licking flakes of fast-seized tuna from her lips. To run away with what bits of shine and char we find into the forest of the present.
We were wondering, Sarah, if you could take us on a tour of the locations in targeting and the discoveries you had about the connections between them.
Yeah.
Massive sort of
The scope is
cyclical journey.
Sure. I mean, I definitely didn't move out here with any of this in mind. And like, it took me a while to figure out that this is what I was writing about. But when I was sort of going through, I think I was working on the early John Hendricks poems in forms class and talking to some writer friends about it. And along about that time, I discovered about like I think there's over 500 uranium mines that like at that point hadn't even been attempted to be cleaned up on the Navajo Nation. And I was like, first of all, the idea that like the uranium that made the bomb that was enriched in Oak Ridge, right? Like that came from somewhere. And it just never really occurred to me to look into that until I was confronted with it as like a very real wound on the Navajo Nation land that like harmed people I was meeting and becoming like, getting to know and coming to love. And I think that connection between the Navajo Nation in Arizona and New Mexico, and like having come out here to study poetry and like, live this wonderful literary life and follow my dreams, but then to be sort of like confronted with the like hard elemental reality of what we took from the earth to make this thing. And also, so that's my story of sort of discovery, but also thinking about I was always imagining when John Hendricks was laying down on the, because he was really laying down in the forest, right? This really happened. I said that, right? I believe that, right? Yeah. Thinking about him and that, like imagining like his mind and scope coming all the way westward, and then having the uranium then being transferred. I don't know. I was just trying to imagine the connections, and yeah. I don't know. I thought out loud there for a minute, but hopefully was that the tour you wanted?
Yeah, it's fascinating.
I mean, it also like the whole thing feels like incredibly personally inevitable that you ended up in the relationship and also the place you're in following this journey from where the bomb was created to where it was mined. And that comes up again in like the third section as a really, with a poem where it feels really angry. We talk about the Navajo Nation and the mines as well. So it's through.
Sorry, were you saying something?
Nope, nothing. Just thinking. It does make me angry. I was like, I'm glad that you noticed that emotion in the poems, because poems are often like restrained, right? But
but from this book section, before we get into that one, so this section, Atoms from Your Hometown, another of our favorite poems is Manufacturing, and in it a man tells a joke. Could you please tell us about that man?
You want me to tell you?
Or tell us the joke.
Tell us the joke and tell us about the man, because we love that poem. We spoke about this earlier before the book launch.
I will tell you about that man, and I will also tell the joke for those who are listening. You know, so you get a little sense of I know it's here. Just like there's
another thing people might not know about this book yet, because obviously the topics are so deep and personal, but also large in scale and serious. It's actually very funny.
It's fucking funny.
It's like the best compliment from you two. It's just like a vote of confidence that I really, I'm gonna take it. So this joke, okay. Well, how do I start? Okay, so one atom walks into a bar and says to the other atom, "Shucks, I've lost an electron." And his friend is like, "Oh no, are you sure? Like that sucks." And the atom says, "Yes, I'm positive. Lost the electron."
And you accurately described that earlier as a dad joke, and the character in Manufacturing is very much like the dad doing.
He's a dad, and he's a character that I've imagined based off of a father of a friend who did dedicate his life to working in the labs. And his title, I asked, I hope I looked this up to confirm, but was a safety engineer. So his job had to do with making sure that everyone who was dedicating their life to working in the lab was safe. And he passed away from cancer when we were in high school, and my friend she was only 15. Again, it was like I was witnessing someone's big grief for maybe one of the first times in my life, and not having any clue how to support her. But he also just stands out in my memory of people from Oak Ridge, because he was such a goof. Like, he would just always tell these like silly puns and jokes, like even when he wasn't doing well. And it's interesting to reconcile the man, the human, the dad with the person doing the job, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what's brilliant about this poem is that the final line of the poem is also the punchline of the joke, which means that sort of the poem ends, it combines and is the joke. And I think you said before we started this that you were worried about the tone of this poem. Some people thought the tone might be different, but I think with the knowledge of what happens to him and the context of what it's all about, I feel as though that element doesn't really stand out so much as has a compliment, has a sense of sadness to it, and again inevitability.
It's one of at least 3 poems in the collection that mentions squirrels, which is, I feel like, as leading
Sarah Sam's experts, we think squirrel neatly symbolizes the skittish nature of atoms, similar but quite alike.
And I think Sarah probably intended, we also wanted to point out the colonial nature of the grey squirrel and the disastrous effects it had on the red squirrel, whilst also remaining,
we can all agree,
very cute.
Yeah. So do you have anything to add about squirrels?
Oh my God, squirrels. I don't know what it is with me and squirrels, guys, but they're so weird. And at one point, I was living in this old farmhouse in North Carolina, and at one point a whole like family of squirrels dug out the walls, and it was the strangest sensation to hear them clawing at 3 a.m. and no one would believe me because it only happened at night. And I don't know, there's just like I kind of feel like, and the way they look at, I like they know something, and they know something I don't.
Yes, like maybe they're your Patronus, but it also sounds like you hate them.
Yeah,
sort of like flash you saw in Hiroshima, and no one in Nagasaki believes you.
Oh God. Isn't that fucking insane? I mean, of course, like what would you say to someone like pre news traveling fast, like what would you say? Like,
I'd say get an exterminator out.
Okay, so as well as squirrels and slizzard,
Shotgun, band name.
another theme came up in this section that we wanted to talk to you about, in particular this section, was a sort of meta theme of your research, sort of like not only informing the poetry but being part of it, and you call it your funny little need to know in Decayed Ghazal, which is another poem in the third section. And so we just wanted you to talk to us a little bit about the research you did.
Yeah, like how did your research go? How much did you feel you understood or needed to understand like this? And did it change not only what you're writing, but how you're writing?
Yeah, so I like put the task forward to try to understand particle physics and the like relativistic nature of everything. I was like, I've never taken a single physics class in my life. Like I skipped that in high school. I was like, see ya. I'd like to study like animals and bio, please. But it's like that's haunted me. So now I like keep trying to learn myself. And the way that I do this is I read like pop science books. I love Carlo Rovelli's. He has a couple of, he's an Italian physicist. He has a couple of books translated into English I love. Also watching like lots of YouTube channels, trying to figure out, like, also I have, oh my gosh, scientists like pop in and like teach me, like I'm trying to understand what the strong force is, what like photons of the electromagnetic force, down and up quarks, strange charm. I mean, the language is just so beautiful. Like, how can you not want to know what the fuck like is going on with particles when this is how we speak about them?
Some of this stuff has made its way into the book. And you're just like, what is this poetry that they're writing for themselves in their own little world or enormous world?
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think it's hilarious that I want to know, but also I get distracted really easily, and and of course, like, I want to know all of this because I want to know what reality is, because I want to know what I am. Like, it's like all of this like big poet's quest into like a quest of self-identity. So it seems like really cool and hopefully based in science and research, but really it's just me being like, who am I? what is life? Like,
just like you
what is life, and
like, what's life, what's a squirrel?
And so it seems like a foray into a world completely unknown to you, but actually it's just the same questions.
Yeah, so I read some philosophy too. There's a philosopher, Akira Mizuta Lippitt, who I hope I didn't say his name right, who studies Japanese film post-bomb, and it's really philosophical and interesting, and just basically the idea that the bomb, I mean, one of the main themes in one of his books is the idea that the bomb sort of changed our notion of inside and outside of the body, like the ability and being able to X-ray technology, which then followed, sort of just disturbed the idea of the border of the body. And
I never made that link. That's fascinating.
Yeah, his writing is like really beautiful and heady, but he looks through representations of this in Japanese film, and that was really intriguing to me too.
What was his name again?
Akira Mizuta Lippitt. I hope that I'm saying that correctly, but I'll add that to the notes.
We'll type it phonetically and Google will know.
Google will know. I should know. It's just that this is all research that I've done like in super isolation, just talking to myself, right? So I'm glad to have this convo with you.
A global pandemic and a baby.
But also physics is an international world, much more the languages that you can cross over, because the language is physics rather than
right. And the discoveries are very like the important discoveries are all international, like based through international cooperation and pre the militarization of science. But yeah.
Okay, so we've reached the third and final section of Atom City, which is called Atoms in Surprising Light, which opens with a quote from the writer Pam Houston: "Could a person mourn and be joyful at the same time?"
And we, as leading Sarah Sams experts, think absolutely not.
No, not at all.
Definitely not.
And we have asked, how about a dog? Could a dog mourn and be joyful at the same time?
No, I don't think so. A cat?
Maybe. But the science hasn't come far enough
Yeah, maybe.
to tell.
But it has advanced enough to invent the atomic bomb, which was terrible for Japan, but brilliant for Finishing Line Press, who have published this incredible book, Atom City.
And in this section, Atoms and Surprising Light, it opens with John the Prophet on your mind again, Sarah, in Stockholm Hometown Prophet, years after moving away.
In this third section, we also experience, again, grief, guilt, distance, and this time like a desire to time travel back to the innocence of childhood. And we'd love to ask you why you've called this section Atoms in Surprising Light.
Oh my gosh.
In light of the quite hard and dark themes.
Yeah, because it's what we were talking about earlier, the sort of anger that comes through and guilt and grief and distance. But it has such a
optimistic,
hopeful title.
Well, I think, first of all, it's just like kind of my personality is to try to look at the bright side. But there's no looking at the bright side of this. So I think it's coming to terms with who I am as a person. Like, what does it mean to be optimistic given like the state of humanity? That sounds really depressing, but that's what I'm grappling with, right? So I don't know. I guess I do come back to the secret.
Is there irony in the title then?
Is there irony?
Some slight irony in this title then.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe that's where yeah, I mean, it's like you're trying to shine a light. You're trying to look at something bright, but then also that image is very much connected to the image of the flare from the bomb, right? So when you're looking at traditional like darkness versus light, those metaphors don't work the same way in light of that.
So we read that in Atoms and Surprising Light, taking that traditional light equals sort of optimism and positive. But actually, just because something's illuminated doesn't mean.
But actually, it was light as knowledge, which always has a downside. Like back in Greek mythology with Prometheus, and then the atomic bomb. Like through the atomic bomb, we've now learned how to do X-rays, but at what cost?
Yeah. I mean, I feel really lucky to have such smart readers on the other end of this. I think I was feeling that when I wrote this. It's like groping my way through these ideas, but you articulated it very well. Yeah.
I mean, speaking of smart, you talk about a physicist we'd never heard of, a female physicist called Qian Sheng, who is a Chinese-American physicist. And she's sort of the one final character who appears in the third section because it's really personal, but she's
the only sort of new character from outside who's introduced in this final section.
And it's part of a poem called Decayed Gazelle, which we talked about before, and you say that she helped us understand decay.
So if the previous section, Atoms from My Hometown, was about like the substance of the space where someone once was, this section definitely feels more like sort of remnants left behind or the decay. So like, is this why you left Shenzhen until this section?
Man, yes.
Right.
Okay, are you sure?
Yeah. That poem, The Decayed Gazelle, is...
We also know what a gazelle was. I mean, so if you want to tell us what that was, because we'd never heard of it before.
Yeah.
Like as a form.
Yeah, and through diligent Googling, we've discovered it and we're excited about it. Please tell us about it.
Well, it's traditionally an Arabic form. It's a very old Arabic form with like very specific rules of like how an end word will get repeated in rhyme scheme, which I kind of like let break down through the poem as a metaphor for decay. Yeah. But I was thinking, I don't know. I think I had given a prompt to Bojan to write a ghazal because he wanted a prompt, and then I was like, I should try too, and he came up with like 20. And I came up with this one, sort of broken down.
Yeah, this one's getting published.
Anyway, I love you guys. Anyway, so I found out about Chen Cheng-Wu by literally like a novelty calendar with like women in science. And it's like, I had never heard her name before, yet like her discoveries were really pivotal to being able to fuel the bomb. So and many, I don't know, her work was incredibly important, but her name was always left out. So that stuck with me. That like,
I've got
really,
a new question that just made me think of then. It's a sort of
Yeah.
personal one. So if
Yeah.
you, as a poet, were either to not be remembered or be remembered because you're on a novelty calendar, which would you prefer?
I'd take the novelty calendar, man.
Yes,
I would pick novelty.
Yeah.
we all pick the novelty calendar.
There's nothing wrong.
In which case, what we can say is there is benefit in things such as the novelty calendar.
Yeah, there definitely is. And yeah, she was obviously a really brilliant person, and I was just, I don't know, I was moved by reading about her work and her dedication to science, even like, again, as she was completely overlooked and like not getting jobs.
She's a woman.
Yeah, Chinese American woman. Yep. But
We looked into her life a bit as well, and I guess the whole idea of this sort of decayed sort of like rhythm and poetry is sort of the fact that she basically was ashamed or distanced herself from the discoveries that she was part of, as like many scientists have been, because of what happened.
Yes.
And the sort of conflicting thing of her being an overlooked genius, but the genius was part of this horrible, devastating
part of the thing she didn't want to be remembered for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What being on a novelty calendar then? Do you know when you like invent something out of the blue, despite the fact that you're like a Chinese American
and the fact that
woman?
when you're working on this, you have to go through the back door into your own laboratory because you're a woman.
Yeah, so when she was at the University of Michigan, she wasn't even allowed to use the front door of her own lab because she was a woman. And then she helped men invent something, wasn't credited for it, and then that thing was used to kill thousands of people, and then she ends up on a novelty calendar. How do you feel about that?
At the same time, you're like, well, at least her name was taken off of that thing they created.
It's a complex, it's a nuanced story, is it not?
Patriarchy has some uses, am I right? For women.
Yeah, so I was really interested in her life. Yeah, and I don't know. I think maybe like it's like in this poem I sort of work through like some of the concepts, but also this idea of like trying to figure out like I'm like, first of all, I just like the idea of being so dedicated to solving a problem is I don't know, compelling. Like I want that, but also the problem is solving. Yeah, it's nuanced and complicated. And then the poem ends with me just sort of laughing at myself that what I take away from her story is like, again, who am I? Like, how do I get back here again? Like, what does it mean to be a woman? What is it like?
About who I am. Yeah.
But I love that the form is so reflective of it, because the gazelle sounds like it's a puzzle that you have to figure out, right?
Yeah. It's a beautiful form. I hope one day to try to write one in English, but obviously the language that I speak. I hope one day to try to write one like that really follows
I hope one day I can achieve it in my native tongue, as opposed to all the other languages I've been writing them in.
Oh God, yeah. Okay, I'll leave that there.
She's multilinguist, guys.
Guys, she's special.
Please buy our book, The Sarah Sam's Unauthorized Biography. Right.
So the final poem we're going to get you to read for us is entitled "In Lieu of a Liaison." Give me. So the title is strange, and it's like a half-formed sentence, but it's only strange when read alone. When you read it and then follow the poem directly, it makes complete sense, because it's in fact an example of enjambment.
That's enjambment,
which we, Shit Theatre, it's a word we invented for when a sentence continues. Enjambment, you're welcome. For when a sentence continues from one stanza to another, effectively bridging the gap.
Yeah, which seems to be what this poem might be about.
Please tell us about that.
Or if you would prefer to just read us
the
poem, this is what we're going to end on. We think it's a really beautiful ending.
I will read the poem. I want to say thank you to everyone for holding on. Like if you have questions, we'll have those. And I hear Billy, who's probably getting really restless, so she might make a surprise appearance. Bojan, feel free to bring her up here, even if it's in the middle of this last poem. I think it would be fitting. And I'll just say really quickly that the title includes the Latin eleison, which is like kind of stolen from the Requiem text. Kyrie eleison means God have mercy. And, just it's like, again, thinking of like mercy not being, when you're really in grief, mercy is not what you want. You want the person back. So in lieu of flowers is also a phrase that I think a lot of poets think about a lot, because it's such a formal phrase, but that we use it in moments of grief. So
most intimate moments.
Yeah. In lieu of eleison, give me back my stepbrother's name. In lieu of hooking up with the performative tenor, put his supple song in my throat. In lieu of my friend's flaked lips, please, morning, press your boring pleasures on him. In lieu of Kyrie, in lieu of the dream in which I drink myself further into dream and lose my husband's face, let me shave a bone nib of my love for him from my manubrium core. Let me chart how my loneliness folds, for I know I will bring myself here again. In lieu of a daughter whose spades for bulbs exactly rounded, let me lay my cheek against softer memories of my mother's voice each time she speaks. Instead of directions, Dad left on Linden, let me go back. Let me go back. Let me describe to you the mood of your well-being I prayed for, the woodland creatures there.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Now is the time for us to open up questions to the room. Obviously,
the Zoom room.
There is a bit of a delay.
Yes.
But we'll try and answer them about a minute after you've asked. So if you've got any pressing questions, ask them right now.
Oh, that's my dog!
No,
Sorry, everyone. There's someone at the door.
If you have any burning
the informal part is starting now. If you yeah. So Rachel has a question that she typed in the chat. So I'll ask.
Thanks. Yeah.
She says, in your opening poem, but think, are you authorized to tell it? Your speaker says, she'll speak more plainly. How does speaking plainly or paring down talk to the work that you're putting together in this collection? Is she okay? She's tired and hungry, probably. Oh. Or your sense of yourself as a poet more generally. Also, weirdly, I'm hearing my voice downstairs. Let me close this door. So I think, I was working through so many, heady concepts, and I wasn't looking at the question head on, like, am I complicit in the droppings of the nuclear bomb? Or what is we don't look at that legacy face on. So how do I do that? And also, as Rachel, who asked the question, knows, I have a tendency to really overwrite first drafts of poems, and then really trying to pull them back to the essence of the driving question or the images that really matter. I mean, that was really important to my editing process for this book. I hope I answered your question, Rachel.
That was lovely.
There's a couple more questions.
Yeah, so Anger Monsoon asks, okay, they're asking, what is your least favourite poem in the book, Sarah?
Is that real?
It's real.
Kill your darlings.
Real. You see it.
Darlings.
Hi, Billy. My least favorite poem. Let me look at the table of contents and be like, oh, I don't want to read that one.
But actually, related to that, because we make normally theatre that happens live, and you sort of don't have to, in a way, have a finished product because it happens again and again and again, and you get to rewrite it. How do you feel about your own? How did you feel when it came to that? Finishing the book. You've been working on it for years.
Yeah, you don't get to keep tweaking it forever. At some point, you have to say, I have to let go.
And how are you looking at it now?
It's super hard for me. I'm one that keeps picking and keeps that this process, that's totally me as a writer. And I've been working on this for 10 years, so it's like, I don't know, this is the launch, but we're delayed 2 weeks. So I've just looked at the final galley. So everyone, your books are coming. They're just coming a little late because, life right now. But I finally felt like, okay, that's it. Like I can't tinker with this anymore, really. There's no purpose to me tinkering with it anymore because I would be doing it like in retrospect rather than, I don't know. Probably doesn't answer your question, but my least favorite poem,
Maybe it's just impossible to say because they're all so damn good.
they're all so beautiful, but Andrew, thank you for making me say that live. They're all perfect. No, there's a poem in there that's like sort of a dedication to Elizabeth Bishop, whose poems I love, and I think it's like that poem isn't the best poem, but I like she influenced me a lot, so it's there. Like it's just gonna stay there.
Good answer.
I don't know who answered, but that feels like a question from one writer to another.
That sounds like a question only a writer would ask. Time Hunter has asked a question. Do you feel the poems were written in exile from Tennessee? So how did place come into the writing of the poems?
I think about that a lot. I think that's Michelle. I think about that a lot because I'm just like really conscious of the fact that I'm grappling with what it means to be in Oak Ridger while not living there. And I do spend a lot of time there. And like lots of people that I love have homes there that welcome me into. You've been there. But I think some distance is helpful. So I wouldn't say exile. That seems hyperbolic, Michelle.
Not exile. What word would you use?
Extended vacation.
Extended vacation. There you go, Hunter.
And
David Moody has a question.
Moody, who pops up in one of the earlier poems.
Yeah, he does. I did David Moody. Do you know that? You're in one of my poems.
You're in one of her poems, David.
In a very in the night out whiskey field, incredibly evocative. I can feel that night in that poem.
I think a lot of us here have felt that night.
Yeah. And
he's got a question.
And that's what writing prompt should we use when assigning your book?
So say we're lecturers, as we could be,
as we are
experts. What prompt would you give the students when assigning this book?
I would like for them to think about what stories are told often in their community about where they're from that only get told in like one way, and how could you imagine it from a different perspective? Or like what is like the dominant narrative of a local history, and how can you kind of, I don't know, I would play around with that.
That's
brilliant.
So applicable to everywhere. I mean, I know we grew up on opposites or other sides of an ocean, but there's a lot of necessary conversation about re-looking at narratives of your sort of home country and stuff like that. I mean, for us, the only thing we ever learn in history is how many wives did Henry VIII have, and how did they die, and in which order. That's it. And
I think we like learned that song too.
Right.
And shockingly, that's an improvement on our history lessons from when my dad was at school.
I mean, it's insane, right? Like, and I get really angry. I get really angry when the thought comes up that it's like anti-patriotic to look at. It's like, well, first of all, we don't have to touch the concept of patriotism right now, but like, isn't like really looking at the history of where you're from like an act of love for it in a way? Like, isn't looking over that an act of like dismissal? And I don't know.
The whole book feels like a love letter to where you're from. And when we've visited you before in the States, I mean, especially in Oak Ridge in Tennessee, like the love you have for that place and the people and your family is really real. And it doesn't
so much love. that we are not used to we don't show that much love in the UK.
Yeah,
I remember us feeling very awkward.
This place is a shithole.
And
Don't come here.
Because we came to you to stay with you in Oakridge, and all of your friends and family were driving us around everywhere, taking us out for meals. They wept when we left, and we showed shock. And you said your friends and family would do the same for me if I were to come and stay with you.
No,
and our answer was categorically no, they wouldn't. And that's no reflection on you, but on us.
On us and our culture. But on top of that, there's like a bigger thing of like, I know that you love where you're from, and the questions you have about it and the analysis of it is part of that.
Yeah, thanks for that. I feel that that's true, and I'm so glad we have those memories. That was so fun.
Anger Monsoon said that was a good answer. You can't mess with Bishop.
You can't. I mean, I love Elizabeth Bishop. I love the way that she would just analyze minute. She just had, her analytical lens was very scientific.
So Time Hunter said, in respect to you and us, how did we meet?
That's a really good question. Can you show us your t-shirt, Becca?
Me and Sarah lived in Granada in the south of Spain together, and I had put on, in honor, one of our favorite late night jazz clubs, the Booga Club. We used to go and drink horrible vodka Red Bulls and dance very
Horrible
late
beer
at night.
too. I know we didn't meet in Booga Club, but like I'm gonna if I write a poem about meeting you, it's gonna take place in the Booga Club.
It feels like we did.
Is that where Doug and I broke the door down?
No, that was Las Cebollas.
So me and some friends came to visit Becca, and that's where I first met you.
Yeah.
And we were not used to the liters of alcohol you would consume in one glass, and so we ended up breaking a toilet door, and two of our friends ended up fighting in the street, while your friends asked, I thought they were friends. I'm like, no, this is them playing, they're having a good time.
Expression of joy. But that's what it was me and Sarah.
We met when we were young and adventure. I don't know. It was fun though, and we have since developed a really beautiful friendship that revolves around lots of fun, but also ideas. And I
so
really
Sarah and Bojan, on our request, wrote intros to our show, text of a sort of play we wrote about Dolly Parton called Dollywood, which also involved us.
Also involved us coming to Tennessee and staying with your family.
Yeah, so I've been a couple of times, and Louise has also been and met Kathleen, and you visited us in London, and so we've been.
Yeah, I've been sort of toing and froing.
Love the cross-pollination. Yeah, that was so fun, and everyone, should check out that play.
We got a question,
especially in Tennessee, should
We got a question from Mary Robbins. Mary Robbins is an old Granada pal from Vienna in Austria. This is feminist epistemology. Yeah.
Yes, she's the Austrian expert in the Sarah Sands oeuvre.
Mary Robbins is taking up the Viennese wing of the Sarah Sands appreciation.
The SS.
Okay. This is more a comment. We love to focus on the largest part of the distribution, but it's so important what happens in the margins, in the tails. Love you, Mary Robbins.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Sarah.
Yes.
If anybody hasn't already bought Atom City, can you just
tell us where they can purchase it?
Yes. I will drop a link in the chat, but you can also visit my website. I'll just give you my website because it's on there, okay? There's the website, and you can also go to link. What is it? I have a bunch of, actually, I think I have the Guernica article already ready to go. If I copy this thing for you, my little tree thing, the tree thing, the link tree thing.
I don't know what you're talking about, Sarah.
We all like trees.
So if you follow my link tree, you get pre-order Atom City is the under the launch party. There's some information about Shit Theater, which you should totally check out. And then towards the bottom, there is the Guernica article about Tsutomu Yamaguchi. So, and also a really important article from the Navajo Times about uranium mines. So I think that's a good thing to drop in there and end on.
Great.
Thank you, Sarah. I'd like to thank you again for not only writing this wonderful book, but thank you for inviting us to be part of its launch.
Yeah, especially as an honour as being leading Sarah Sam Scholars.
It's amazing to be here on your birthday.
Don't
No,
tell us,
oh, so
you know,
not-
and we would like to leave with an apology on behalf of the European academic community again for what happened at the Sarah Sam's convention in Prague in 2011.
And to quote Sarah's mother on the matter, it was terrible and sad and a necessary thing.
Oh, it's a wonderful. That's perfect. That's perfect. I love it. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone who was here. I will message you too, and thank you for all your support, everyone. This wouldn't have happened without so many beautiful people in my life. Thank you.
Sarah Sam.
Ciao.
Thank you. Love you.
Love you too. Bye.